This is Subject Analysis 8 video homework. Something surprising that I really found. There was a couple of things I found surprising. Some of the more larger ones was that German, of all languages, is the third largest spoken language as a primary household in South Dakota. It was, if I remember right, it was something like 5%, followed by just like Spanish and then English. But I mean, still, or Spanish and like Native American language. Sorry, not English. But outside, obviously, English being the number one, German the third. I think that was insane. Something that I also found surprising was that of all industries, construction was the only one that I really couldn't see any dip in or any noticeable dip in compared to previous years during the COVID-19 pandemic. I thought that was really interesting because I know how much of the world shut down, and then just something else to get on later in the slides is just how small some construction companies are. It seems surprising that a lot of them didn't just stop work for a while. A lot of business didn't just shut down, which caused some people to become unemployed during COVID. I mean, I thought that was insane, especially in construction. Like you would think that during that time when everything was becoming more expensive to import certain things, that it would have been so bad. And then another thing I thought surprised me the most, honestly, was that elementary and secondary schools are the largest employer in the state, and it's pretty large. That gap between them and the next one is. I mean, because I know we don't really have any super large towns other than Sioux Falls where you would think there'd need to be a lot of schools or a lot of people employed by the school. So the fact that that's the largest really shocked me. And there's over a $13,000 difference in median salary between men and women in South Dakota, with men making $51,174 and women making $38,169 as the median. I thought that was a little crazy considering you always hear how nursing majors and all those make so much money and how many people we've seen in the state take that major and be employed in that position. I would have figured it'd been much more closer than that. And then one of the last thing that I really found to be really surprising to me was that we ship out over $6 billion worth of live animals and fish. I thought, that was really crazy because I know, like, for the most part, you really only see ranching on the west side of the state. I mean, you do see it on the east side, but not as much on the west, just because it's so much easier to farm crop on the east. So I thought that was really interesting that we somehow managed to ship out over $6 billion worth of that. Something that just felt wrong with me when I was reading this, that just didn't seem right, is back in the first slide you saw how I mentioned construction didn't see a dip, and that's something that didn't sit right with me, that construction didn't see a dip, like any noticeable huge dip during the COVID-19 pandemic. Because then at the same time, almost 70% of all construction establishments in the state have less than 4 employees. So I kind of find it hard to believe and surprising that over 70% of those businesses were able to stay open during the pandemic and find work and be able to keep their guys moving and working and earning enough money to pay them and things like that. And another thing that just felt wrong is that during COVID, there was a massive drop in the growth for hospitality. I mean, it was like a 60% drop in the growth, and then all of a sudden a year later it jumps again to being over 64%, and then it immediately leveled back off. I mean, it felt weird looking at the graph and see it go up, or being level, going straight down and then straight back up like that. It's just something about that feels weird. It just didn't sit right with me. I didn't really know what was going on there. There was just data that wasn't input when it was supposed to be, that messed all that up or what. And then just a suggestion I had is, I noticed as I was going through, not all the graphs seemed super consistent with the data they were representing. The biggest one I saw was the vets across the nation versus vets that live in South Dakota for like the what is it, like the Gulf War or the Middle East War that we went through since the 2000s. So there was like tens of thousands living throughout the nation. There's only a couple hundred in the state, yet their bars were like this. This was the nation just slightly above ours, but obviously there was a huge discrepancy in who's living across the nation versus in the state. So I feel that's something that they should fix, something they should address, is making sure if they're going to show data through graphs, they should have the graphs more accurately represent the data, so you're not being misled on thinking, oh, majority of our vets live in this state, when it's vastly disproportionate versus where they were showing it. And that's all I really had for any major suggestions I could think of. Otherwise, it all looked pretty good. I guess another one would be, again, tying back to the things I felt wrong, is just make sure our data is accurate, make sure we're updating it right, make sure we're collecting it correctly. Because again, the big one that I didn't understand was the nursing one, and just the hospitality in general, how it dropped 60% and then went back up. I feel like someone should look into that and see if that the math and the data is correct or not. But that's all I have.